The club is Reading in League One. They're likely to be sanctioned after their own supporters invaded the pitch in protest against their owner Dai Yongge, which forced a postponement of their League One match against Port Vale at the weekend. The supporters took matters into their own hands and decided to protest. After 3 minutes, the game was held up as fans threw tennis balls onto the pitch, and then after 16 minutes, it was, come on then, let's go on. And a large group of Reading supporters invaded the pitch, waving a flag saying, Dai Yongge out. So what do we know about this fella? Not a lot. We'll know more by close of play, no doubt, because this will develop. We're going to be hearing from a leading Reading fan very shortly who will justify why they did what they did and how frustrated they have become about the situation that they are watching. But in the meantime, just before we came on air, I spoke to the former owner, Sir John Madejski, who is absolutely gutted about what's happening to his club.
I am absolutely heartbroken the way Reading Football Club has developed or not developed, as the case may be. And I have absolutely total sympathy with every single fan out there and everybody that is involved with Reading Football Club, that works for Reading Football Club. It's just a kind of tyranny that is being unleashed upon the club as we speak. And it's just not fair and it's not right. The thing I can't get my head round is Mr. Dai allegedly lives in a £100 million house next door to the King, next door to Buckingham Palace in Palace Gate. If he can live in a £100 million house, one would assume, rightly or wrongly, that he should be able to do the husbandry at Reading and look after the club to his best ability. He may want to sell the club, but unless he looks after the club, he isn't going to have anything to sell. And there's all this just burning up the rule book, getting us deducted 16 points. The whole thing's an absolute travesty. It breaks my heart because, I spent many years of my life getting to Reading Football Club into a nice position, as indeed lots of other people who helped me on that journey. So it's a total slap in the face for them. Well, more than a slap in the face, it's a kick in the stomach. He wants to sell the club, and he should fund it properly. Then we might be able to get out of this division we're in. We could, not knowing whether the wages are going to be paid at the end of the month or not. It's just tyranny and cruel and terrible.
It seems like communication with this man is a major problem. Is there a way in here for you to push him into doing something about it?
I've only met him once in passing at Huddersfield at the playoffs at Wembley, and I've never had any communication. I think he just felt, well, I own the club now, that's it, move on. He's history. He's never communicated with me whatsoever, so, he clearly doesn't want to communicate with me, which is fine. His prerogative, sadly, he owns the club. Don't forget he's put £260 million into the club. That's no mean feat. But it's all wasted money. He's built a state-of-the-art training ground at Bearwood Park. But what's the point of a state-of-the-art training ground at Bearwood Park when you're in the blinking First Division? It's nuts. The whole thing's just so lamentably sad. It's not funny. And I think that if he could only bring in people on the ground here, people that know the club, understand the club, that have the wherewithal with the community and so on, hearts and minds and all that, which is totally lacking and has been for years, then perhaps we might get somewhere. But like the fans, we're all helpless. It's just so frustrating and sad.
That was Sir John Madejski, former owner of Reading. And of course, in between Sir John and this man Dai Yongge was the Russian Anton Zingarovich, who encountered problems himself.
Who was a clown himself.
Reading fans have had to live with a lot going on off the pitch at their football club. Paul Mann is a Reading fan. He speaks for the Sell Before We Dai group spokesperson. Paul, good morning. You were on the pitch on Saturday, as I understand it. When did you guys make the decision, right, enough is enough, we're going on, we're going to make a protest on the pitch and get this game abandoned?
That was probably the day before, after all the news came out about the players being sold without the director of football, Mark Bowen knowing what was actually happened, Ruben Sellers not knowing, Dai Yongge now taking over the transfers of players from ridiculously low prices to teams. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about Reading FC. We're not a volatile fan group. We're not a group that's going to be going crazy every single week. It's taken us years to get to this point. It's so sad that we're here. We don't want to be here, but there is a tipping point for every single fan base, and I don't regret doing it. And I'm sure there's thousands of others who don't regret doing it as well.
So are you going to continue to protest where you are at the weekend? I think, Paul, I'm looking, is it Wigan away? Will there be protests there?
There probably will be something of some type, but we try to focus mainly our protests at home matches. So that's the main focus at the moment. And also we'll be moving to things that more directly affect Dai Yongge and to the EFL as well, who I've got to say, this is a man that they've put in position, but they're not prepared to remove. I mean, he is absolutely screwing the club over. He has no care or compassion for this team. At what point will the EFA say, we're not complicit in this anymore? Take some responsibility, EFL. You're killing a club with over 150 years of history, and you're just standing by and let it happen. I know you have an obligation to your fellow members, but there has to be a point at which you say, this isn't working. Save us. We need to be saved, EFL. Save Reading Football Club.
Simon, surely Paul's got a point there. When are they going to step in and say, look, this guy no longer is interested, it would seem, in his football club?
But that's not their gift. That's not their responsibility. The EFL's responsibility is to sanction a football club under the rules that the 72 football clubs in the Football League put together. They can't just step in unilaterally and decide autonomously that because one football club is having trouble with an owner that's clearly run out of money, that they can step in.
Yeah, but
and
they
just
can
take
see
him
with
out.
their own eyes that their own fans of Reading are causing their own game to be abandoned.
But that's fine, and I don't think that's acceptable. I think the Reading fans have every right to protest, every right to take their issues as loud and as vociferously as they can. I think they have no right to go onto a football field and no right to stop a football game from being played, at least of all for the Port Vale fans that have travelled across the country to be able to watch the game.
What would you say to that, Paul?
I was expecting nothing less from Simon. That's thoroughly what I'd expect. And I also respect his point of view. You know, I understand what he's saying from the EFL mindset, but who is to blame here then? Do we just let this continue?
The owner's to blame. Yeah. Clearly.
The owner is to blame. So the owner has walked away. He's taking no responsibility. He's left the players with microwave meals. We have no way of travelling. We have no hotels. At what point do you say, okay, so you're
that doesn't enable the EFL to step in, does it, Paul? The point is, if you want to bring the EFL into the conversation, then we'll have a difference. If you want to bring in your principles of what's being done to your football club, and I wonder how vociferous you guys were when this guy was spending like a drunken sailor for the first few years of his ownership. The fact that there's this myth running around that needs to be debunked, that he was stopped from owning a Premier League football club, because that isn't true. I wonder when John Majewski pops up and sells the business to a Russian, how much money John made out of that transaction and the Russian that was brought through the door. So I haven't finished, Jim. Everybody's hands are over this. So the bottom line
Simon, that's fine. That's fine. You saying, like, as a fan, you know, we didn't step up, we didn't protest about him spending all the money. No, okay, you want to say that, but what about the people who work for Horizon and their accounts there? Are those people responsible for the post office scandal? Because that's working on the same basis.
No, it's not.
We can't take responsibility for something that we can't control.
No, it's not.
We don't control that, though, do we?
No, but you're happy to receive the benefits of it. And I'm suggesting that if your argument extends to the EFL need to step in, then you've got no grounds, no legal framework besides a moral argument. And if you want to run moral arguments as legal structures, then we're going to be in a very difficult place in every walk of life.
Well, life is very difficult, Simon, as we know. If we're going to get involved in morals and football, we could go down a very big black hole, couldn't we?
I mean, Paul, you and the Reading fans will be aware that Dai Yongge has that he stopped investing in a club in Belgium, Roselaire, that, as I understand it, his family stopped investing in a Chinese club, Beijing Shengteng. So there is form here, but that doesn't help or ease your predicament any further, does it? Because you are now seriously concerned that your club could become a Bury or a Macclesfield.
Yeah. I would also point those two clubs did actually go bankrupt after he took ownership of Reading. So I'm not going to claim hindsight on that one. I'm not going to pretend that the EFL knew about that one. But yeah, it is a very, very scary position to be in when you know that that's happened. You know, no football fan can think their club is safe, because it could happen to you at some point. You know, we sit here and there's lots of people listening to this thinking, oh, thank God it isn't them. And I wouldn't wish it on any other fan, but it can so easily turn. Only 10 years ago, just over, we were in the Premier League, and that's how quickly it can change.
It's a very good point. Martin, you wanted to come in?
Paul, first of all, it's amazing to say that, you know, he spent £260 million, and then you were talking about a training facility. Well, what's use is it having a training facility when in actual fact everybody is all are crying out for proper facilities for a start. So he has put some money into the football club. But the main point I'm going to say to you, are you in these protests, are you just going to continue protesting and you're going to get games abandoned, because eventually the club itself, regardless of what happens to him, is going to suffer greatly?
Yeah, that is the problem, isn't it? The club is suffering terribly also from the EFL punishments that they're giving to us repeatedly, which are having absolutely no impact now. And I do agree that when Simon said that we did overspend, yeah, sure, we took the punishment. I accept that completely. But I do say on the protest going forward, it's a flexible thing. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're going to repeatedly get match abandoned, because I don't know. It's also a fan-based thing. It's not me. It's everyone who's involved with it. You know, it's what happened on Saturday was just a natural progression from where we've been over the last few years. It's been an absolute downfall of a football club. You accept relegation. You accept your team not doing well, bad transfers. But this is a negligent owner who just doesn't care, who's just walked away and removed all responsibility. And it also makes no sense, like you say, Martin, after spending so much money on a training ground. I mean, it cost an absolute fortune.
Paul Mann, I want to thank you very much indeed. We're going to head to a break at this stage. So Paul's saying, yeah, I was on the pitch. I was one of those fans who went on the pitch at the weekend, and the game was abandoned. As you rightly say, Simon, not just Reading inconveniencing themselves, so Port Vale and the fans who made the trip hugely inconvenienced. But the thing is this, a wall of silence from Dai Yongge's ownership as we speak. Simon, many messages coming in on this, and one of the main messages all the time, and I think it's a legit one of the big questions, is why doesn't the EFL intervene at this point? You say they don't because they can't.
They can't. It's not because they won't. It's not because they don't want to. It's because they literally, legally cannot. This is a limited company. It's not owned by the fans. It's owned in spirit and in value by the fans. And by the way, I do get the fans' point of view. They're watching their club being dismantled by someone that seems to have been quite keen to spend 260 million quid of his own money, which can't be discounted from the equation, and is now seemingly disenfranchised and disconnected from it. We've seen it before. We saw Tony Jai at Aston Villa. That club was close to going out of business, dropping out of the Premier League into the Championship, and was saved at the last minute. You've seen it with Ellis Short. The moment it's lost interest, clubs just fall. Now, he's taking it to the extreme. But the point is that the EFL can only deal with the rules that are put in place by the 72 separate limited companies. You can't just rock into a limited company and decide when that business gets shut down and owners get booted out of it, or how it's run. That's not how the law of this land works.
But it's only going one way, isn't it?
Well, for everybody concerned, does anyone believe, not that I have any skin in the game, and I think clearly they're in a terrible position and he's run it poorly, the fella is about to lose £250 million, right? Why would that be something that he wants to do? And if there's someone else to take over it, someone's prepared to buy it, and someone's prepared to... We saw who was prepared to buy it, some clown with an energy drink that couldn't find anything, right? So if there's a queue of people that want to buy this football club to be able to perhaps compensate the owner for some of the expenditure that is clearly made, at the same time as be able to steady the ship, where are they? No, what someone will do, clearly, and people will say, well, that's poor luck on the owner. And quite frankly, it'd be true. We'll take it off you for nothing. Well, he's not going to do that. But the irony of it is the worse the position gets for Reading, the less value he's got.
Yeah, but it might at least be worth hearing from him or his people. But at least a line of communication to the fans isn't too much to ask, is it, Martin?
I wouldn't disagree with that.
That's what the fans... Surely... Instead, but Paul Mann's got better things to do, the fan spokesperson, than come on talkSPORT this morning with us. And I'm glad that you did, Paul, and put himself front and centre as, yeah, I'm a respected individual in society, but I'm one of those who went on the pitch on Saturday.
But in an ideal world, you're probably right. In the real world, right, many times you will hear Glazers don't speak to Man United fans, do they? Many owners. You can say, well, they should.
Yeah, but Man United aren't going out of business.
Well, Man United have their own troubles and travails, right? But the point is that many owners. What about the Wigan owners? Did they communicate with the fans when they were putting spread bets on the basis of Wigan getting relegated? Was that something they communicated? What about the fella down at was it Macclesfield or one of the clubs, the football agent in Dubai that owned the football club that ultimately the fans he communicated with them. They hated what he said, right? And so he communicated with them, right? So the bottom line is, in an ideal world, what he should say to the fans is, this is what he should say: I'm really sorry. I'm going to walk away and give the football club to someone else for nothing. And by the way, I'm going to leave an extra 100 million quid in the football club to prop up the problems I've created. Other than that, what is it you want to hear from him?
Do you carry on or do you not? Have you given up on us?
But I just told you that. He clearly, by his actions.
Why do you think he's not communicating with them?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak for the man.
Because he's got nothing to say. Well, and he cannot be proud of his ownership spell.
Well, I imagine that he's looking at the reality of football like a lot of people do, and I'm not excusing it. I'm suggesting that the reality of it is once you get involved in football and you suddenly realise it's a very difficult exercise, you've done 260 million quid and you realise you've made a fool of yourself and you realise you've lost a load of money and you realise how challenging it is, like a lot of these guys, like Ellis Schultz and like you want to get away. And Randy Lerner as well. You want to get away. You want to get away from it because you don't want to be involved in it anymore. And now you've got a problem because the wheels are coming off. And to add insult to injury, you've now got the fans invading the pitch. They'll say, what's their choice? And I understand that. Does it resolve anything?
Is this touching a nerve with you this morning, Mr. O'Neill? You can identify with this, can you not? Randy Lerner, he mentioned there. Ellis Schultz, he mentioned there. You've had to deal with these people.
Well, I think that when you own a football club, it's whatever you want to do with it is entirely up to you, because it's your money that's going into it. I take Simon's point that I think that both the people he's talking about, Short and Lerner, decided they no longer wanted part of it, and they wanted to get out, and that's fine. That's absolutely their prerogative to do so.
It's difficult to know what the next step is in this process for poor old Reading. I know we're homing in on the Reading this morning and their individual case, but so we should. Because this is what this show should be doing, Simon. We should be highlighting the fact that the fans have been left high and dry. And again, this guy, okay, he had the best intentions, but it's blown up in his face. But for God's sake, tell us what you're going to do about it.
But he doesn't have to. Just because we're the media doesn't mean that he has to. And he doesn't have to tell the fans if he doesn't want to. Should he? Of course he should. He owns a public domain business.
Most definitely
of course he should. But a lot of people don't do the things that they should. Clearly, he's meeting his financial obligations, because otherwise, guess where they'd be? In administration, and he'd be out as the owner. So he must be meeting his financial obligations. He must be paying certain parameters. Otherwise, someone would have wound the business up, or they may well yet do that.
He's failed to pay wages on multiple occasions.
But he's not. But they're currently not in a position.
They had a winding up order in October for unpaid taxes.
And did that winding order stick? No. Right, so we move on to the next subject. He clearly is still in a position where he's meeting his obligations, albeit maybe not in a timely fashion, maybe not in the perfect scenario.
But Reading's on life support at the moment.
Reading is not in a good condition, no. Absolutely not. Okay. The bottom line is how do they get out of this position? Like Wigan, like others before, I'm sure they will.
You're sure they will?
Well, how many? Okay, let's list them. How many football clubs have gone into liquidation over the 100? Every business in society. Name me a business that's 130 years old in this country. Not many. Most football clubs still exist from when they started. There's only a very few that you can probably name on one hand that have gone out of business.
Okay, well, next up for Reading is a trip to Wigan, and we'll see if the fans are on the pitch again. In the meantime, we hope to hear from Mr. Dai Yongge.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.